Lately, more so than ever, people talk about what the meta is for different competitive games. For those who are not aware as to what that means when referring to a meta, it is a combination of weapons, characters, and playstyles that tend to give players the best possible chances of success. This can be anything from a character's ability and what their ultimate ability is, to what areas of the map you should go to or avoid, what weapons are statistically better and what attachments are the best for it, all the way down to how a character looks and how they can blend into their own environment. Throughout this video, I'll be pointing out some combination of metas that existed in different games and why they do need to be addressed by the developers to change things up and fix what is broken. Let's first look into map-based metas. This is going to be a simple and quick look as to how the map can change what gear players will use. When looking into Overwatch or Overwatch 2, some maps will work better for certain heroes. The map King's Row can be easier to manage with the tank hero Reinhardt, for example, and while not being impossible to pull off, it may be a tricky map to use the sniper hero Widowmaker, due to there being very few vertical areas on the map. Overwatch modes tend to move around the map or change maps after a round. If it's a King of the Hill type mode like Control, the map will change after each round, whereas if it's a moving objective, such as the Escort mode, the level is larger and may benefit certain heroes more than others at different points of the map. From there, players can determine which heroes would be most valuable either in the entire map or mode, or if there are sections of the map that would be worth swapping out to another hero for. As a side note, even when selecting an optimal hero for the map, there's always the chance that the opposing team will choose a hero of their own to counter yours, and a whole new slew of problems arise from it. Bringing this back down to a smaller and less dynamic example, let's look at CSGO. Looking at the defense side of things, when protecting the two bomb sites, A and B, the defending team setup can look something like this, where there are two players on each site, with one flex player who can watch mid or attempt to flank. Once the attacking team commits to one of these sites, the defending players can then rotate a few different ways to set traps for the attacker. Meanwhile, on the attacking side, there are various ways to break into the objective. This can be done with a full-on 5-man blitz style push to the objective, but this can also be done by using some split plays, such as having 3 players push the objective directly, while 2 others play mid. Or even try for a 4-in-1 split to try and trick the defending team to guard the wrong objective. From there on out, players and teams can come up with many other creative ways to defend an attack, but nevertheless it does come down to players hitting their shots. From just the map alone, players will come up with different plans, and the meta will tend to be which plan works most often. While some of this can be offset by which team is performing better and getting the most eliminations, there will typically be some sort of inherent advantage for certain characters' abilities or attack routes. CSGO has been home to some maps being very one-sided, with maps such as Nuke and Train. The developers can then decide whether they want that kind of advantage to remain in these maps, or if they want to rework them to have a more balanced feel and allow more playstyles to prosper. In my opinion, every map should have some personality to it. So while there may always be a sniping lane somewhere on the map, it may not be in the most vital part to winning the match, which would make for players using more aggressive loadouts while the most dedicated of snipers continue to try and make it work regardless. Some maps should feel more like home for certain playstyles so long as there are ways to counter it, with those counters being feasible and not near impossible. Games that have special abilities such as Apex Legends, Overwatch, and Valorant will require players to select certain characters that have the best chances of winning. Having a healer is almost always a must, as well as having characters that can stall in one way or another, and characters that can teleport. Whether it's by being a tank with a large health bar, or if it's characters with abilities to temporarily cut off areas with a wall or AoE attack. The main concern for this kind of meta is that certain characters will be invaluable, while others will be forgotten and useless more often than not. While we do want players to have the option to choose from a large list of characters, the meta may prevent players from using a subpar character. From here, the developers will have to choose what to do. Do they want to nerf the characters with a high pick rate, such as lowering their health or damage output, or should they buff characters that don't get picked? Of course, we want every character to have some sort of value, but sometimes there may just be a lost cause or simply a character that has to be used in an arcade mode and not much else. There will never be a straight answer to this, as it does depend on each scenario, as well as how different high-skilled and high-ranked players use these characters when compared to everyone else. A character can be an absolute menace to lower ranked players, while being a non-issue in higher level play. This is where the developers will struggle the most. They will have to make changes, but it can either be directly to that character, or by buffing or creating a character that would be a counter pick. In Overwatch, Brigitte was introduced with an ability kit that counters Tracer. The issue here though is Brigitte was not only a great pick to counter Tracer, she was also very reliable against the rest of the team as well, more so than other characters. This ended up with Brigitte receiving multiple nerfs to bring her more in line with the rest of the cast. Even when creating a new character to act as a counter, the new character can end up becoming the next major problem with the game, far more than what it was originally intended. While hero characters with flashy abilities are always going to be an issue, this can also affect games that are slightly more grounded, such as Rainbow Six Siege. While Rainbow Six Siege has a short time to kill with one-shot headshots, operators in this game have gadgets and gear that are critical to winning, and can also break the game from time to time. For instance, when the operator Blackbeard was first introduced, his rifle shield, which blocks headshots from the front, had insane durability. This basically meant that Blackbeard will have plenty of time to react and pop a headshot well before his shield would break off. Blackbeard could still die from explosive or body shots or getting shot in the head from behind, but this allowed him to stand in areas where he couldn't get flanked and easily get kills. With Rainbow Six Siege also having destructible walls and windows, he could chill out by a broken wall or window and not really be in any danger. Eventually, the developers did lower his shield health so it can only take 1 or 2 shots. Before the patch though, the original shield had 800 health. As to a general rule of thumb to figure out how to balance these abilities, I'm going to tackle that at the end of the video. For now, let's move on to the last topic, weapon metas. When discussing weapon balance, we want to see what advantages or disadvantages the weapon may have, such as high power versus low fire rate and mobility, vice versa, and everything else in between. Every weapon should have some sort of risk and downside. In games such as Fortnite, where there are no attachments and the weapons are tier-based, balancing is going to be fairly simple. There are less moving parts and it all comes down to which weapons players are relying on the most and which weapons are having the most success. In other games such as Battlefield, Escape from Tarkov, and others have weapon attachments. These attachments can be used to change the performance of the weapon by extending its damage range, have better recoil control, or mobility, and more. So let's look into a game that includes weapon attachments that plays a large role in the game. Even if you're a casual fan of Call of Duty, it would come to no surprise that many players have heard about what weapons are meta, as well as what attachments to run. The issue with Call of Duty is that it is a casual first-person shooter in nature. Granted, there are a lot of sweats in this game that can hold their own, and with the right rule set, it can become a very balanced and competitive game. However, when it comes to the base game and what weapons and gear are meta, that can depend on the kind of player you are. If you're someone with class who prefers somewhat balanced gameplay, the meta you care about would come down to SMGs, assault rifles, marksman or sniper rifles, and maybe even a pistol. Not only do you want to figure out which of these will give you consistent results, but you would also want to figure out which attachments you can place on the weapon to make it that much better. Sometimes a meta weapon may not be that great at first, but with the right attachments, it not only becomes reliable, but also one of the best weapons in the game. On the other hand, if you're the casual player who just wants to save his way to get kills, you probably only care about shotguns, riot shields, grenade and rocket launchers, and claymores. Talking about meta in Call of Duty does typically refer to the former, but every so often there will be a joke gun that's so powerful no one can ignore it. In Warzone, it seemed like every other season there was a weapon that broke the game. There was the R9 fire round burst fire shotgun that killed instantly.
Let's go, Nick. Let's go, Nick. 1 more on ground level. 2 more on ground level.
The DMR 14 rifle that killed in 2 shots.
We need bounties. It'd be huge.
Nope, dude.
The M16 and AUG burst rifles that killed in 1.5 bursts.
Oh. Yeah, I got bursted instantly by an M16.
I got you.
The revolver Snakeshot rounds that insta-killed. And recently, the Akimbo shotguns that insta-killed. Fortunately, all of these metas, if you want to call them that, have been patched. You can kind of see the pattern of what a broken meta looks like. Weapons that have a very reliable 1 or 2 shot kill capability, while every other weapon doesn't have any way to compete. In any game, there will always be a few weapons that are preferred and technically better than the rest. When a weapon outperforms and dominates everything else, there's no reason for anyone to use any other weapon. Less risk, more reward. At the same time, not every weapon or gadget has to be competitive. There can always be some weaker weapons that can be used just for fun. The only concern I have is that most of them do need to be somewhat close to the better weapons in the game. Otherwise, there's little reason to use them. It's a struggle between making something unique and useful, instead of ending up making a clone of a weapon that's already in the game. Regardless, whatever weapons are preferred or statistically better, the developers should always take a look to see what can be done to rework them. The changes may not need to be drastic, but just enough to make them less reliable. Not every weapon that is meta needs to be looked at or adjusted if people are having success with other weapons. Even so, the developers may want to mix things up just a little bit to slightly alter the meta. It can get stale if there's only one or two weapons everyone is using, simply because the rest of the arsenal isn't as appealing. Lastly, let's talk about how to balance the game overall. What standards should be looked at when the time comes to make changes to the meta. Let's just say that the game we want to try and balance has a competitive community, and the game has a high skill ceiling. With this in mind, we will want to look more at how the higher skilled players are playing the game. If there's feedback from the general community about a certain map being one-sided, we'll want to check what the win rate is for that map across the board. Further, if we have additional info, we can find where the trouble spots are. Where are players getting stuck, and what can be done to expand the map and give it a better flow. That is, if any change is necessary at all. There's going to be a lot of noise and comments about the map and everything else, and as the developer who can see what's going on, you should definitely double check what's being said, and look for any evidence that would suggest that the problem is indeed valid. When going through this information, always check how the map is being played by top tier players, and if they're having any issue with the map at all. If they are, then chances are you will need to make a change. It all depends on what performance you're seeing. If the map is actually balanced and the win rate doesn't really prefer one side or the other that much, then this may be a non-issue. But if you see the opposite, where one side is winning far more than the other, a change may be necessary. It's fine even in a competitive environment to have a map be one-sided. However, it should feel more like a slight advantage rather than a guaranteed win. When it comes to characters' abilities, we want to see the pick rate, how effective those abilities are, and if the community have been able to counter them. Playstyles will differ from one person to the next, but people will lean towards the path of least resistance. Secondly, we also want to split whatever statistics we have based on the skill level of the players. If there's a ranked system in the game, players on the lower end of the scale will be playing drastically different and are usually less organized than higher ranked play, which will mean that they may not take full advantage of each character's ability, which can lead to certain characters appearing weaker or stronger than what they actually are. The actual trouble you want to look into is at their higher ranks. Then, using some caution, tweaks can be made to the abilities and weapons to be better balanced. In my own opinion, there will always be certain abilities or weapons that will just end up not being useful in high-level play, and that's perfectly fine. It just makes it all the more impressive if someone does find success against the odds. Sure, a weaker ability or weapon can be adjusted, but don't try to flip the meta around them patch after patch. It's far better to make smaller changes and fine-tune it, rather than taking big swings that can end up breaking the game. It's a difficult battle of making changes that are very necessary and implementing them ASAP, versus looking at things you yourself want to see improve. At the same time, try not to sabotage the balance that's currently in place. I understand wanting to add new things into a game that would be fun, but if something is overpowered, it will of course be fun to use, but an absolute nightmare to fight against. The fun part of the game should come from the gameplay, the weapons, and how they feel, and how useful the ability is. It should never come from something that guarantees kills and wins. If so, the entire community will be fighting to have that and forget everything else. If there's one thing to learn quickly is players have no honor. If something is broken, they will use it until the minute it is patched. If a character has an ability that cannot be countered, it will be used by everyone for as long as they possibly can. Normally, if an ability or weapon works really well in high-level play, it is going to be amplified in lower-level play. If things get to a point where it has to be addressed, you will always want the change to reflect the higher-level play. With all this said, there is one other option games could have that can satisfy players of all ranks. This would be to have a different rule set based on your rank. Having two different rule sets could help make the game feel better balanced for both ends. Have a low rank rule set so that you can nerf the abilities that low tier players are struggling with, while mid to top tier players can continue on without the change. Rule sets have been in games before, such as the Call of Duty League, where basically half the gear and weapons in the game are banned to provide a more balanced experience. while everyone else can continue on using whatever they like outside of this playlist. This is also something we see in sports, where college football does not have the same rules as the NFL. Some things are changed to benefit lower level play, while not affecting everything else. If there is a strong competitive environment within the game, I feel it is in the best interest of the game and the developers to give them a playlist that mirrors what they want. Meanwhile, a separate category can be used by everyone else, and the developers can use that playlist to test out new items and weapons. The playlist that has stricter rules and works closer to high-level play should not just be a ranked game mode, but an unranked one as well. This would allow casual players to try things out to see if they like this rule set, as well as give competitive players a playlist that follows the rule set they enjoy, without having to rest their rank every time they queue up or be penalized for leaving. One last thing to mention is that this will also show the developers what playlist is preferred. From there, making meta-changing decisions should be a little clearer and easier. For instance, in Overwatch 2, every new character that will be released will be banned from competitive playlists for the first 2 weeks of release. This gives the developer time to view how the character is being used in unranked lobbies, and whether or not the abilities or weapons are over or underpowered. It also gives time for players to get used to this new character, and come up with ways to counter them before having to risk their rank to someone or something that may be unbalanced. So with all that, I'll leave a small clip from Flats, a high-level Overwatch player, as I can't really say it better myself.
I've been playing this game for many, many years, through the good and the bad, and we're hitting the good again. And you're going to tell me that high elo balance isn't everything. Yes, it is. Because if you don't balance from the top down, your game falls apart. Balancing from the bottom up kills your fucking game. It's what happened to Overwatch 1. Actually, to be fair, Overwatch 1, they tried to do both. Overwatch 1, they tried to balance for low rank and high rank at the same time, and it did not work.
So that's all I have to say for now about this topic. Let me know what you guys think, and what do you think is actually a good idea, and what would you like to see changed. So until then, I am Mr. Rain, and I'll see you guys next time.